So if we take a look at what we were looking at before this track of my voice, there's some other things we could do. Like, let's say that I wanted this to not sound like an adult female voice, and I wanted it to sound like the voice of a child. So here's what it sounds like now. Inspiration is something I find in everything. Okay, I sound like an adult, right? So if I go up to effect, let's just change the pitch. Okay, I want to show you what some of these things do differently and why you might want to use some in different ways. So if I wanted to sound younger, right, then I would take some of the depth out of my voice. So let's listen to this.
Inspiration is something I find in...
Okay, that is too much. It's actually pretty interesting though if you wanted to sound sort of like future robot girl, but anyway, let's see.
Inspiration is something I find...
Still too much. Inspiration is something I find in everything. I can find it in looking at a bird on a wire. I sound much younger there. You can also make some adjustments. Like if I were to knock this down, I would sound not like probably not like a feminine voice at all, probably. So let's see.
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
Right. And you could probably do something like if you wanted to really lower the pitch of your voice and then like maybe also add some other effects to it to speed it up. But let's just play around with this a little bit and let's move this up higher again.
Inspiration is something I find...
Because there is I think a sweet spot.
Inspiration is something I find...
Where you don't get all of that weird artifacty sound.
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
It's still a little bit high, so we could...
Inspiration is something I find in everything. I can find it in looking at a bird on a wire.
And so I think we're starting to get into the range where it starts to sound a little bit like a young person's voice. Let's try this.
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
All right, so
let's
just say that we want to...
a bird on a wire.
Say that we want to stick with that. And then the other thing that you can do, right, if you wanted, is you could come over here to effect and then see what the difference is like whenever you change the speed versus the tempo, right? So if we change the speed, it's going to change not just the tempo, but also the pitch, right? So it's just listen to this right now.
Inspiration is something I find in everything. I can find...
Right, so that really starts to do the chipmunk thing, right?
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
But we can knock this back a little bit.
Inspiration is something I find in everything. I can find it in looking at a bird on a wire.
And it still sounds a little bit artificial, but we can knock it back just a little bit more, and it might really start to sound more like a child.
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
That starts to sound like maybe a kid who's about 11 years old, right? Let's see.
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
Yeah, so that kid's probably like around between like 9 and 11. All right, and so there's some different ways that you can approach this, right? Anyway, and so now I've got a totally new track. Well, not totally new, but let's see.
And well, they also inspire change to stop. I'd like to think I'm inspired.
Okay, so you can really kind of play around with some of this stuff. Now, if I were to change the tempo, let's just try that. So if we go here to tempo, then go to effect and then change tempo. And so if we were to lower the tempo,
inspiration is something I find in everything.
It sort of changes the pitch a little bit, but not so much. It's just really slowing it down.
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
Okay, and so I could really slow it down too.
Inspiration is something.
That's a little bit too much.
Inspiration is something I find in everything.
You start to hear a little bit of the artifacts, and I don't really like that. But what you could also do, if we were to take off, like if you just wanted to slow your voice down, I think you'd have to do it somewhat moderately, not extremely. But let's just undo. I'm gonna say undo change speed, and let's undo change pitch. Yeah, and then so we're back to this, and so this is the normal sounding. Inspiration is something I find. Right. So if we go then to effect and we go to change tempo, you'll see kind of what the difference is if we just want to slow it down a hair. Inspiration is something I find in everything. Right, and that's just sort of like much slower, but I barely changed it, right? So let's just, that's like a notch higher. Inspiration is something I find in everything. It's like super sleepy, right? It's like the sleepy way of talking, and that's speeding it up just a little bit. Inspiration is something I find. And it still sounds like my voice. Inspiration is something I find in everything. But see, what I'm doing is I'm starting to speed my voice up now. Inspiration is something I find in everything. But all I'm doing is changing the tempo. So it's not actually changing the quality of my voice very much. Inspiration is something I find in everything. So if I just wanted to be able to talk faster, I could do it this way. Inspiration is something I find in everything. I can find it in looking at a bird on the wire. And you can see that it still sounds like my voice. It's not like it's changing the pitch like some of these other things, right? So there are some different ways that you could approach this. I'm just going to hit cancel. And another thing that you could look at, let's just mute this, is the way that you can change tempo of music. So let's unmute the actual music piece, right? And let's take this, highlight it, and this is how the original sounds. Let's maybe go about here. Right, so this is kind of slow. So if we were to take this whole piece and then take this tempo, we could really increase the tempo a lot. And that's significant. So let's say that we wanted to take a sample that's not the very beginning, and let's do that effect and test it where we change the tempo. And that really changes the whole feeling of what we're doing, right? If we increase the tempo that much more significantly, right? And so I think, there's, now you could do that with a lot of music. You might be able to do that with a lot of music just to change the feeling of the music, and it would still be maybe interesting, and it would, you might really like it, but then just it changes the mood. But if you were to go and try to do that, say, for something like this track, it might not work so well. So like if we take a singing portion, here, let's just listen to that. Okay, one of the things right off the bat I can tell you that might be a problem if we start to speed this up in any way would be that there's this singer, the thing that makes his voice so beautiful is that he has a lot of vibrato, where his voice sort of wavers because he's so perfectly on pitch, right? And so it's the whenever you've got something that is in perfect tune, then the amplification, like the amplitude, is greater because everything resonates in harmony with each other, with all the things resonate in harmony with each other. And so, or I guess I shouldn't use the word harmony when I'm talking about music because it actually has a specific meaning, but they will literally resonate, and it increases the amplitude when you're on perfect pitch. And so that's one of the reasons he's got all that vibrato in his voice. Well, if we speed that up, it's going to start sounding really strange. For instance, like if we go to change speed, let's try that. And let's just increase it a little bit. Actually, that's not too bad, but if we go much higher than that, right? And if we lower it, it's actually not too bad because what we're doing is changing the speed. It's doing something natural with the vibrato. It's where we would start to adjust the pitch that might be a problem actually. So, but if you do it just a little bit around the normal range of where it started, it's not going to be that bad, right? So. And so that's actually not too bad. It's when we start doing things like this that it's actually pretty interesting. It sort of sounds like a cow mooing. But yeah, that would be one way of making the tonality a little bit different if you wanted to match something with another clip. But let's see how that's different, say, from changing the tempo. So let's increase the tempo. All right, and see, that's where the vibrato really starts to sound bizarre, right? It's too much vibration. Now, but if we slow it down, it's not as bad. But this is the tempo, and this is maybe not the right one based on the way that the guy's voice is, right? So the speed actually for this one might be better. And then the other thing that you could look at is adjusting the pitch. So here's the natural sound. But if we drop it down, his voice might not sound as beautiful, but it actually still sounds normal. And this is a bit higher. Well, quite a bit higher. Okay, and this starts to do something similar to what we were doing when we were changing the speed, but you can actually also adjust, and this is the frequency down here, but this is based on the pitch, based on musical notes, right? So what our perception of these musical notes would be. Anyway, so these are some different ways that you can apply stuff, but also how they're going to affect things differently, I think is pretty important to pay attention to. Now, the other thing that you can look at too is this really interesting thing called a phaser. So let's come down here. I'm going to mute this track and unmute the one with my spoken word. And let's take this as a sample. And let's look at this thing and the effects that's called Paul stretch. So if you want to take something that's reasonably normal sounding, and then you want to take it and make it sound like there are weird ghosts in the room, you could take something and apply a Paul stretch to it. So we do a preview here. Okay, and then you can adjust the stretch factor. Let's say that we want to adjust it out to 20, for instance. Let's do a preview. It's going to take a second. It takes a lot longer for that sample to get started. So I actually probably need to go ahead. Let's apply it, and you'll see what happens. It's going to take a second. Okay, actually it took several seconds to apply that, and you can see what it did is it actually stretched it out really, really far, this track. And so let's just hear what that sounds like. Let's start to play it. All right, so it's a little bit creepy. It sort of sounds a little bit like Harry Potter speaking parcel tongue or something. All right, so let's see how this is. But what you can do with this, is you could take a sample where it just creates like this kind of space that's filled with this audio track, and maybe you want to find something that is not recognizably words, and you can take that and you can do repeats on it, and you can turn it into a loop, and you can have that, maybe drop the level down and play it really low, and it could just run in the background or something, right? Now something else, I'm going to just undo that. I don't want to, oops, that's not what I meant to do. Let's do, I'm doing Command or Control Z. I'm just undoing what I did, and now if I scroll back to the beginning, it's there. Something I want to point out is if you're doing voices and you're recording stuff in clips, the other thing that you want to do while you're sitting there with your microphone is that you just want to record a stretch of noise, of ambient noise that your mic naturally has. And you might ask me, why would I want to do that? And I mean this without talking or anything. And so, for instance, well, the reason that I would want to do that is that any microphone is going to have a little bit of its own white noise, unless you've got like a super, super pro mic. And some of the mics, you might really have a hard time completely removing the noise print or the sound, that white noise that's in it. And so if you are not having a continuous audio file where you're talking and you like start and stop in places, then you might have this roar of white noise in the background. And then whenever you stop your talking clip, it'll, and then, you know, you have to start it back up later, it's going to be like, right? And you don't want that to happen. So if you just record an empty track that just sits there and captures the sound of the ambient noise that's coming through your mic, then what you can do is you can use that white space as filler space in between the clips where you're talking. And that's if you cannot completely remove the noise and if it's bothersome, right? Or if it's making you have to turn all of your tracks up too loud or something like that. So that's something that's actually very helpful to know. And the other thing that you always want to try to do when you start recording something, this is very important, is that you don't want to just immediately start talking. You want to have some of that dead space that's just silence before you start talking, and at the end, when you stop recording, you want to have some, let it run with some dead white noise at the end. Why would I do that, you might ask? Well, the reason is because if you need to capture what's referred to as a noise print at the beginning of your track, so that you can later go and remove the noise out of your file, then you're going to need a prolonged period that just captures the normal white noise in the background without you talking. The reason I suggest that you do it both at the beginning and at the end of your clip is because maybe the air conditioner kicked on in the middle of you recording, or maybe somebody turned on a fan or something, right? Or maybe, this has actually happened to me, maybe the fan on your computer starts to run and your mic picks that up, right? And that allows you to capture noise prints at both the end and the beginning so that you can find those different noise prints and remove them from the audio. Okay, so so I'm going to do a test. I want to show you, like if you have noise, how you can get rid of it. Now, because my mic is actually a pretty good mic on my headset, I don't have a lot of noise to get rid of. It's pretty negligible, in fact, and so it'd be hard for me to do a demo to show you. So I want to show you a way that you could, hopefully your system will let you do something like this, where you can reproduce this yourself. Otherwise, you can just, walk outside and start recording something in the wind. But I'm going to try to do something artificial where I go up to my system preferences, and I'm going to go to the sound. And what I've done is I've changed my output to my internal speakers, which are going to pick up all sorts of garbage. I'm leaving my input to my headset, though, so that I can still record this video. Now, the important thing, though, is I'm changing my output to my internal speakers on my computer. And the reason for that is I want to be able to play some white noise through a YouTube video that will just produce the noise for me, and so that I can capture it. The other thing that I'm going to do in Audacity is I'm going to go here and I want to make sure that I'm changing this to my built-in microphone so that it works based on my computer's mic. So that means it'll pick up ambient noise. It'll pick up that YouTube video that's playing, right? And so let's go there really quick. And I'm just going to start playing this this white noise video. And then I can either have it turned up, but I think that's a little too much. So I'm going to have it turned down so that it'll still be significant, I think, in terms of it coming out of my speakers, and it'll be picked up. So what I'm going to do to give you a simulation of being in a place where it's noisy and you're recording, so is that I'm going to just play that and I'm going to start recording. And I want you to, what I want you to see happening, right, is the fact that I'm going to not talk at the beginning and I'm not going to talk at the end. So you can see how this is going to be beneficial. So I'm going to hit record. Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second and then I'm going to stop. Okay, and I just stopped the recording. So if we scan this back, you'll see at the beginning, and here, let me turn off this white noise now. Just pause that. Okay, so if I go back to the beginning, let's just jump back to the beginning of my audio track. Oops, where did I start recording that? Oh, looks like I accidentally started recording it in a different place. But anyway, if I wanted to zoom out of this, I could move this to the beginning if that mattered to me. And actually, I haven't shown you how to do that, so I'm going to show you really quickly. So let's zoom out of this. I'm going to hold down Shift to zoom out. And you can see that it didn't start from the beginning. So just to keep things simple, I'm going to choose this little Shift button right here. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And if I hold down the Shift key, it will only drag this one clip. If I don't hold down the Shift key, it will shift everything. So I want to undo that. And I want to only hold down the Shift key and move this to the beginning. And you'll notice that it will allow me to shift it, you know, before it actually hits the very beginning. So let's just back this up and let's play. And you're going to see, let me expand this again. But you're going to see that there's this really tall, well, actually, it looks like I moved it too far back. So there was like a tall spike in the waveform that was going to be a loud click whenever I started the recording, but it looks like I might have gotten rid of that. Let's just see. Nope. Okay, there it is right there. So if I wanted to get rid of that, oh, and if I want to, let's just say that I want to snap this over here. There, start that from the beginning. If I don't like the way that this click is, I can just get rid of that with my cursor. I can just take that and select this portion and just hit delete, because I wouldn't want that to start anyway. So let's listen to this. You can see all that noise.
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for...
And even though that noise print is louder at the beginning, you can still hear it, even though it's done a little bit of ambient sound correction. You can still hear it throughout the track, and you don't hear it so much towards the end. It's not as strong, but you can still hear it. Right, and so you can see how the beginning of the track and the end of the track are quite different. Anyway, so if I want to take this, I want to make a selection right here, and I'm going to, you know, use this as my noise print. Basically, it's a sample that I'm going to look for a match. It'd be sort of like if you had a Word document and you wanted to find all the instances of the word traveler, and you wanted to change that word and do a find and replace and change that word to vacationer, right? It's similar in that you can take this noise print, you can find a pattern, and then you can replace it with something else. And the thing you'd be replacing it with is quietness, right? So anyway, we're going to make the selection of the thing that represents the noise. And because I'm not talking here, I don't have to sort of weave in and out of me talking and try not to get the version of me talking. And I can go up to Effect, and I can go to Noise Reduction. I'll click on Get Noise Profile, and it's going to take the noise profile right here, okay, of this piece, all right? And so the next thing that I want to do is go over to Effect again, and I want to go to Noise Reduction again. And now that noise profile is in my clipboard, right? And so let's hit Preview. All right, you can still hear the noise, right? So if we turn the noise reduction up a lot and see what happens, it's gone, right? So here's the thing. If I want to apply that noise print to this entire track, I would select the entire track, and then I would go up here to, where is it? Noise reduction. And now it's going to apply that to the entire track. So let's turn that back up again, and let's listen to preview for the whole track.
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second.
That's not bad, right? I got rid of a lot of that big white noise. Now I think that noise reduction is turned up a little too high, because you start to hear these weird little audio artifacts around my voice. It's got this kind of weird robot sound to my voice, so let's try reducing it a little bit less.
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second.
I still think that there's a little bit too much, and so I might lower it down a little bit more. You can also adjust the sensitivity. The higher you make the frequency for the bands, it's going to start to sound a little robot-y also.
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second.
Okay, I can still hear the noise at the beginning, but the reality is probably this might be okay if I was actually going to get rid of that lead in. Okay, so that's something to pay attention to. So if I were to commit to this, let's say that I'm going to commit to that. Now the reality is I'm probably going to get rid of all of this lead in anyway. And so what I'm left with is a pretty clean sounding voice. So.
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second, and then I'm going to stop.
Okay, and that's not too bad. I might still be able to get away with less modification. I can still hear a little bit of weird artifacts around my voice, so I might want to reduce it even less than that, or I might want to reduce the noise less than that. In fact, let's just go ahead and we can say undo noise reduction, and we can go back and try to apply it again and see if we can get something with a little bit better. I think it started around 12. So we hear the noise there.
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second.
And that might be a little bit more acceptable, like between maybe 16 and 17. You could also adjust the sensitivity to see what happens. And what I like to do is I like to do something really dramatic to see what the end result is, so that I know how far back to dial it back, right?
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second.
It doesn't seem like that's making that significant of a difference. If I turn the sensitivity down, it does make a difference though. Anyway, so once again, I could take this and I can delete. And the other thing too is we can see how it affected the ending. And I don't hear anything, right? So that's good. So that means the silent places are really silent. And now I've got myself a clip that I can work with.
Okay, now I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to talk for a second, and then I'm going to stop.
That's really great. I was able to get rid of all that white noise. And so that's why it's so good for you to leave that consistent long stretch of silence at the beginning of your speaking clip and at the end. Even if it feels a little bit awkward, it's still important. Okay, so the other thing that I want and need to show you is how to export stuff. I'll do that in the next video.